Let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first SAC student talk of this semester. Our today's speaker is Prahlad from SMS Batch 17. Um, Prahlad, please go.
Uh, Flattering introduction. Thank you. So I'll start. So just a couple of things before I begin. First thing being that if you have any questions, seeing that we don't have a lot of people, just stop me and ask. Just unmute yourself and stop me and ask. So I have a break somewhere around the halfway mark. So we'll have a question session then and one at the end. Okay, so let's start. So first thing, outline is not very important. Let's go. So the first section is going to be on just getting you like re-familiarized with graph theory and some notations that I'll be using. So hopefully all of you know what a graph is. You have a bunch of vertices and you have edges between them. So as usual, I'll be denoting them by V and D. And this you might not have seen before. So for a subset of vertices, I let G of V dash denote the subgraph induced by V dash, right? So what does that mean? So I will take all these points and then look at in G of V dash, I look at all the edges that are incident on these points. Okay, I'll give you an example in the next slide, don't worry. So what's a clique? This you almost definitely have seen before. It's a subset of V such that the subgraph induced by K is complete. Okay, what is complete? Complete graph is one where between each pair of vertices there is an edge between them, right? So here's an example. So this graph will be the graph on the left. We'll be taking for the next few slides. So just keep a note on it. So here, if you look at the subgraph induced by V1, V2, and V10, I just zoomed that on the right. So this is a clique because this is complete, right? Between any two pairs of vertices, there is an edge between them. Okay, so this is the idea of subgraph induced by something and a clique. So let's look at a couple of important graph problems. Why important we'll get to later. So the first one is the independent set. So just remember this because we will use this at the very end of the talk. Okay. So what's the independent set? So a subset of V is called independent if no 2 points in I have an edge between them. Okay, fairly simple definition. And this naturally leads us to the independent set problem, which asks if given a natural number k, can I find the independent set of the graph such that the cardinality of the independent set, or cardinality of the set is at least k. Okay, so this is the independent set problem. This is super famous. You should have seen this quite sometime. So again, here's an example. The same graph that we took before. There are a couple of examples on the left. I've just marked the independent sets with like encircle the vertices. So V2, V5, and V8, they form an independent set because obviously they have no edges between them. And on the right hand side, I think this is the maximum independent set, or it is a maximum independent set. So V1, V3, V5, V7, and V9. So this also forms the independent set. Okay. So yes, this second problem, this you actually might not have seen before. So I already told you what a clique is. So what a clique cover is that I want to find a bunch of cliques such that the union of all those cliques is the whole vertex set V. Okay. So that is what the clique cover is. And what is the clique cover problem? It directly leads us to a problem as well. So given a natural number k, we ask if there exists a bunch of cliques k1, k2 up to kl, such that all of these are cliques obviously, and that it covers the graph G, right? And I want to make sure that the number of cliques that I'm taking is bounded above by k. So hopefully the click cover problem is clear. So again, here's an example. The same graph that we've taken all this while. So here's the first click cover, right? So take V1, V2, V3, V4. Can you see my cursor?
Yes, yes, we can.
Oh, okay, great. Fine. Then I can like point stuff. So take V1, V2, V3, V4, V5, V6, V7, V8, and V9, V10. Okay. So all of these are clicks because an edge is a click. So and you can see that this covers all 10 vertices, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 10, everything's there. So this is the first thing. The second thing is you can take triangles. So take V1, V2, and V10, V2, V3, and V4, V4, V5, V6, V6, V7, V8, and V8, V9, and V10. Right? So this also forms the clip. Yeah, this also forms the clip cover. So this is the notion of covering a graph with clicks. Okay, so it's exactly as it's own. So these are two so-called important problems. And why is it important? Well, important means different things for different people. For most people, by most I mean people who are not interested in computer science, they keep appearing in something called real-world problems. Real-world problems would be like stuff in networking and all that. People in computer science don't really care about that. What they care about is the second part, which is that they are NP complete. I'm not even going to bother to explain what NP completeness is. It is not going to affect the course of this talk, but I will given the definition if you are interested. If you don't know what this is, doesn't matter. Okay, here's the definition. Look at it. Forget. So, right. So now this already leads us to a question, right? So we know that these problems are NP complete in general. The question is, can I find a graph class? A graph class is essentially like a collection of graphs, right? So with a specific property. Can I find a graph class such that I can solve these problems like easily, which is in quotes? Um, the answer is yes, by the nature of the title of the talk as well as the title of the slide. Um, one such graph class is caudal graphs. So, I mean, a lot of graph classes that we usually take, like planar graphs, for example, planar graphs, in planar graphs also independent set is NP hard or NP complete. But in bipartite graphs, for example, it is not. You can find it in polytime. And another graph class for which it is not NP complete is the collection of caudal graphs. So what's a caudal graph? A caudal graph is a graph such that if I take any subset of the vertex set of size greater than or equal to 4, then the subgraph induced by, it should be V dash. Sorry, that's a typo. It must be V dash. So the subgraph induced by V dash. Okay, let me just note that. Sorry. So the subgraph induced by V dash is acyclic. Okay, slightly strange definition, but let us go to an example. Hopefully, it's clearer then. So again, look at the graph that we took before, right? So this I'm claiming is not caudal. Why? Take the vertices V2, V4, V6, V8, and V10, the ones that form the internal pentagon thing, right? Here, what does the definition say? It says that the graph induced by V dash must be acyclic, but the graph induced by those vertices that I pointed out, 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10, that is cyclic, right? And of size, and of size greater than 4, it's of size 5. So therefore, this is not acyclic, but I can make this is not caudal. But I can kind of make this caudal by putting a little more lines in between, like I've done before, done on the right. So I've added V6, V10, and V2, V6, and I claim that this is caudal. So just notice one thing, that I'm not claiming that there must be no cycle of size greater than or equal to 4. That's not what this says. What this says is that the graph induced by that cycle must not be a cycle, right? Even here, if you look, there's a huge cycle. There's V1. So the whole thing forms a cycle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. This is a huge cycle, right? The outer star. But there's still caudal because the graph induced by all the vertices together is not acyclic. Okay, that's what I'm interested in. So caudal graph you might have seen in other formats as well. They're called different things. So they're also called, I think, triangulated graphs. You can kind of guess why, but I'm not going to go too much into it. They're also called graphs with perfect elimination order and so on. My point being that caudal graphs have been very well studied, and there are a lot of important properties that they have. So the most at least not the most important, the stuff that we are interested in are the following. Okay, first thing, as I promised, is that the independent set problem and the click cover problem that we described at first can be solved easily. Okay, by easily I mean that they can be solved in polytime for caudal graphs. Okay, this is the first problem that we are interested in. First property that we are interested in, and the second property is that for a caudal graph, the size of the maximum size independent set, or I should have written the cardinality of, but yeah, the cardinality of the maximum size independent set, which is usually denoted by alpha of G, which is called the independence number of the graph G, that is equal to the size of the minimum sized click cover. Okay, this is slightly mind bending, but stay with me. Okay, so this is called, I'm not sure what chi dash is always called, but maybe just call the click cover number of a graph. Okay, even if it's not, I'll call it. Okay, so I'm just going to call it the click cover number of a graph. So the claim is that for a caudal graph, the independence number and the click cover number are the same. So again, I won't delve too much into this, but my claim that you can kind of think of it later when you have time and you're like bored. That my claim is that for any graph, for general graph, the size of the independence number of the graph is at least it is less than or equal to the click cover number of that graph. Okay, for caudal graph, it's not an inequality; it's an equality. Okay, that's what our forefathers have told us. It's actually not very old. This result is like 1970s, I think. Yeah, about 1970s. So, okay, that was the first part. Okay, just a general introduction to graph theory and caudal graphs. So now let me go on to the second problem, which is terrain guarding. So before I tell you what terrain guarding is, I should first tell you what a terrain is. For that, I should first tell you what a polygonal chain is. So this, again, you might have seen before. It's not a very fancy concept. You are given a bunch of points in R2. And what you do is you just join these points with a straight line. Okay? This is called a polygonal chain. So you join Vi and Vi plus 1 with a straight line. And this curve in quotes, if you like, because curve is a mathematical term. So this curve is called a polygonal chain. And this polygonal chain is said to be defined by V. Okay, so here's an example, just to make things clear. So if I have V1, V2, V3, V4, and V5, then the polygonal chain defined by this is what is shown here. Okay, this looks slightly messy, right? There's self-intersections and so on. So what we like to do is to make sure that there are no self-intersections, okay? Because we'd like to treat this like a function, okay? The chain right now is not a function because it's not a graph of a function, I should say. So what we'd like to do is to make sure that there are no self-intersections so that you can think of it as a graph of a function. That is exactly what a terrain is. If I make sure that there are no self-intersections, and how you get to the self intersections is, fairly obvious way, is to make sure that the ordering that I had for V is such that the x coordinate of Vi is less than or equal to the x coordinate of Vi plus 1. So that's how I've defined the terrain, and it's also called an X monotone polygonal chain. I don't like that notation, so I'll just use terrain. And I put a footnote here because this is not the most general definition of a terrain, but for the purpose of the talk, we'll make it work. You might, okay, so there, yeah, okay, so I'll just leave it at that, okay? So you can just think of it as this. So here's an example, okay? Fairly simple example. I have V1, V2, V3, V4, V5, V6, V7, and all of them are arranged such that their x coordinates are in order. Okay, so this is how a terrain looks like. So I mean, I don't know why they named it a terrain. Maybe because it looks like a mountain range or something. But yeah, I mean, names don't matter. Just keep. It's just an idea of what a terrain is. So I've told you what a terrain is. Now I'll tell you what guarding means. Okay. Again, when I
Prahlad,
go for guarding, yes, go on.
so do you allow 2 points with the same x coordinate in the terrain?
Okay, you caught it. Damn it! I thought I can get away with someone not catching this. Yes. So let's go on. So the footnote is for exactly that. Okay. So usually you do, and we'll see an example where you do very soon. And but that already like gives a little bit of problem. So let's say you allow stuff to have the same x coordinate, right? Then
Okay.
let's say for example you have a point at 1 comma 2, 1 comma 3, and 1 comma 4. Okay, the question is, can I order it such that 1 comma 2 comes first, then 1 comma 4, then 1 comma 3, right? Then
Okay.
there are problems because this will once again become self-intersecting, kind of, right? And
Yeah.
this also does not remain a function anymore. So what I said before kind of falls apart. But this was a mistake I made knowingly. Okay, so
Yeah.
that is what the most general definition of the terrain is. You're right. So it makes sure that I allow x coordinates to be same. But yes, you're right.
So in that case, do you order them according to the y coordinates, or do you just randomly
Yeah.
order them?
So how I define it is how I define it. So let's say 3 points Vi plus okay Vi minus one Vi and Vi plus one. Let's say all of them have the same x coordinate, right? Then I insist that the y coordinates must be in order. That is the y coordinate of Vi plus 1, Vi minus 1 must be less than the y coordinate of Vi, which is less than the y coordinate of Vi plus 1, or the y coordinate of Vi minus 1 is greater than the y coordinate of Vi, which is greater than the y coordinate of Vi plus 1.
Okay.
This was exactly the definition I didn't want to give, but since you asked for it, and this, so does that kind of answer your question? I mean, I wished I had something to write with. I don't, but hopefully, like you got it. Is the
Yeah, yeah, I
idea
got it.
okay? So
Also, one small thing.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, do you keep that order consistent at every place that happens in one single terrain, or do you just pick randomly ascending or descending in different places?
Yeah, so we don't force the order to be consistent because if
Okay.
we did, then the terrain will only like go up. Hard to define, but a quick answer we don't. So it can
Okay.
change per VI. I mean,
Okay.
or change for the triple VI minus one VI plus one.
Okay.
Okay,
Cool.
so
Thanks.
maybe you can just check out what happens if we force it, and you'll see that not nice things happen, but are equivalently very nice things happen, which is not very general.
Okay. Cool. Thanks.
Okay? So yeah, that's a great question. That is exactly what the footnote was for. So right. So now let's look at the notion of guarding. So I say that two points in the terrain see or guard each other if the line joining them lies above the terrain. Okay, again, fairly simple idea. Think of the terrain as like a mountain range or something, then this comes naturally, right? So then we write the visibility region of a point P. Okay, it's the set of all points that P sees. Okay, where P is a point on the terrain. Okay, so by the way, so a point on the terrain need not just be like one of the VIs. It can be in any of these line segments. Like it can be a point here. Okay, so that is the notion of guarding. So again, let's take an example with the terrain that we had before. So the visibility region of V4 will be V2, V3, V4, V5, and V6. Okay, so we also allow the line joining, for example, V4 and V5 that lies on the terrain, right? So we include on the terrain when we also say above the terrain. Okay, in the definition, we also let like above or on the terrain. Okay, so suppose the visibility region of V4 is what's written down 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the visibility region of V6 will be what 4, 5, 6, and 7. So just a quick note here that this relation, the notion of seeing or guarding, is clearly reflexive. A point can see itself. It is also symmetric, but it is not transitive. For example, V2 can see V4, right? V4 can see V6, but V2 cannot see V6. Okay, if it was transitive, then our problem would have been much easier, therefore less interesting. So hopefully you're convinced about that. So so next we define something called orthogonal terrain, which are slightly nicer. Okay. So what they are is that the lines that I have must be parallel to the x or the y axis, right? So therefore an orthogonal terrain will look like blocky. It'll look like this. So like Anushka pointed out before, here I'm obviously allowing 2 points to have the same x coordinate. So, for example, V2 and V3 will have the same x coordinate, right? So, this is the notion of an orthogonal terrain. So, why I mark this using different, different like whatever, one square and one circle and so on, is because okay, forget V1 and V9 for the moment, the endpoints. Look at everything in the middle. Okay, can you figure out something about this? So look at V3 for example. The angle on V3 above the terrain, like this angle, is 90. This angle is 90 for V5. For V6 also this angle is 90, even though it looks slightly different than V5. Right? V3 and V5 look fairly similar. But V6 and V5, even though they look different, they still have 90 above the terrain. And the ones that I've marked with boxes, V2, V4, V7, and V8, all of them have 270 degrees, right? So that is one thing. So that leads to one definition. And another thing that leads to a definition is the x coordinates of the previous or the next vertices. For example, V3 is consider V3. The x coordinate of V2 is the same as V3, but the x coordinate of for V6, the x coordinate of V5 is not the same as that of V6, right? But the next one, V7, has the same x coordinate. So this kind of defines a bunch of notations here. So a vertex VI is called convex if the angle measured at that vertex above the terrain is 90 degrees and reflex if it's 270. And it's called left if the x coordinate of the previous vertex is the same as that. And it's called right if the x coordinate of the next vertex is the same as the x coordinate of that vertex. So we use script C to denote the set of convex vertices, script R to denote the set of reflex vertices, CL and CR to denote left convex and right convex vertices, and RL and RR to denote the set of left and right reflex vertices. Okay, so here's a pictorial nice depiction of everything that I said. The vertices which are encircled are convex. The stuff that are inside the square, those are reflex. The stuff that is red is a right vertex. Stuff that is blue is a left vertex. So you might notice that V1 and V9, you can't apply this definition, the VI definition, to V1 or V9, because they don't. For V1 there is no concept of x VI minus 1, right? And for Vn there is no concept of x VI plus 1. We kind of circumvent that using a concept of opposite type vertices, but I'm not going to go too much about that. Anyway, so
Prahlad,
yeah, go
I
on.
had one more question. Can you go back to the figure?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the definition of orthogonal terrains, you just said the line segments need to be parallel to either of the axes.
Correct.
So do you allow a point, say V10, between V5 and V6, like lying on the line segment?
Some people do, some people don't. I lie in the middle. I don't care. Okay, so
Okay.
you can allow it, but that once again gives a problem as to what will you define that point as. Will you define it as reflex or convex? Which is why people kind of don't include those points. But
Okay, you
it actually doesn't really matter in the long run. But for the purposes of this talk, we don't allow it.
okay, cool.
Again, I didn't want to write that down. You pointed it out. So yeah. So again, great question. So now let us define the terrain guarding problem. It is again fairly natural, in the sense that what you are given is a terrain and you are given a natural number k. Okay, we ask if there exists k many points on the terrain such that they can see all the important vertices of V, right? So the important is in quotes because we can define what important is. So there are two versions, and there are actually three. I've only defined two. Uh, the first version is called discrete terrain guarding, right? And this is fairly simple. Does there exist a subset of V of size at most k such that the visibility region of that set G is, G sees all of V, right? That is the question. So I'll let you take that in. The next question generalizes this, okay? What it says is, I'm restricting where I can place G, okay? Place the guards to a set called G dash, which is a subset of V. And I'm also restricting the important vertices of V, right? And I'm restricting that to set called C. I ask if there exists a subset of G dash of size at most K, which sees all of C, right? That is the question. And hopefully you can see why this is a generalization of the discrete terrain guarding problem. If I let C and G dash to be the whole of V, then the annotated terrain guarding version of the problem is the same as the discrete version. Okay? So hopefully that is clear. So again, so now a bit of fluff. These are results that I'm not going to prove. But we know, okay? We know that terrain guarding, both versions of the problem are NP hard. If you don't know what NP hard means, forget it. Even orthogonal terrain guarding, which seems much easier, is still NP hard. Again, if you don't know what NP hard is, forget it. So there's another concept that I've not defined, something called a p-task. If you don't know what this means, forget it. I don't care. So the question that still is open, and probably the biggest question in this particular subfield, is that does there exist an FPT algorithm So an FPT algorithm is like a special type of algorithm. Okay. Again, I'm not going to go too much into it. And does there exist a special kind of algorithm which solves the terrain guarding problem? Okay, this is the important question. And the thing is that we don't know yet. Okay, this is still open. This has been open for I think about ever since the 2010 paper that King and Cron proved about NP hardness result. It's been open since then. So for solid decade, and people were trying this before that as well. So ever since the introduction in like 1996, it's been kind of studied, and we still don't know yet. So, but what we do know is a paper which came out fairly recently in 2018. We know that orthogonal terrain guarding is FPT. It admits this nice algorithm. So obviously the question that is now left is is it true for a general terrain? So can we actually like extend these results to a general terrain? So that is what my work was about. So before I get into that, I think there is just a couple of more definitions. So and there'll be a break right after this. So I'm running late by about 2 minutes, which is expected. I'm horrible at time. So right. So here's the definition. So given an annotated terrain guarding instance. Okay. So what are the annotated terrain guarding instance mean? So you're given a terrain TVE, then n is the number of points in V. K is the parameter that we're interested in. Okay. And G is the set of guards. Is the set where I'm restricting the guards to be placed at, and C is the set that I need to guard. Okay, so this is an annotated guarding instance, and the visibility guard is defined as follows. Okay, it is the graph CE dash, where in the graph I join 2 points if there exists a guard in G which sees both of them. Okay, a slightly weird definition. Hopefully the example makes it clear. This is again the same terrain that we took before. Let's say my C is the odd numbered vertex, V1, V3, V5 and V7. And G is V2, V4 and V6, the even numbered. So I've marked them using squares and circles again. So what will be the visibility graph of this instance? Okay. The first thing to note that the vertices of the visibility graph is the same as C. So V1, V3, V5 and V7, right? And there's an edge between V1 and V3 because there exists a vertex V2 which is in G, which is both V1 and V3, right? So there exists an edge between V1 and V3. For V3 and V5, V4 sees both V3 and V5, right? And V4 is in G. For what's left, V5 and V7, we have V6, which is both V5 and V7, and V6 is in G. Therefore, this will be the visibility graph of this. I mean, you can convince yourself that there exists no edges between the other vertices. Okay, so we've defined a bunch of stuff. The next thing that we'll do in the next section is combine all of this, and that's where the magic is. So okay, here's the break. So if you guys have any questions, I'll take them now on this part. Oh, by the way, this meme is not accurate. So I think I'm about 3 minutes in. Yeah, times I'm about 33 minutes in. Okay. Right. So I'll move on if there are no questions. Is that okay?
Yeah, you should move on.
Okay. So right. So now what we'll do is combine the. So what all have we discussed? We've discussed caudal graphs. We've discussed terrain guarding, and then we've looked at something called the visibility graph. Right. So what will combine them at the end is that the click cover problem in the visibility graph of a terrain is identical, not identical in the most general sense, looks like the terrain guarding, the annotated terrain guarding instance. Okay, that is where we are trying to head to. That is the result that kind of combines all the things that we've discussed so far. So in 2008, they proved what I said for orthogonal terrains, right? So they took an orthogonal terrain and they considered this particular instance, right, where the guard set is restricted to the set of reflex vertices, and the interested set is the set of left convex vertices. It can also be the set of right convex vertices. A symmetric claim will hold for them. This was proved in 2008 by Katz and Roisman. The pronunciation is probably wrong. They are people from Israel, so I don't know how to pronounce the names. But what they said was that the visibility graph of this particular annotated terrain guarding instance is corridor. Okay. They also said something more, something a little more interesting. They said that for this particular instance, a click in GT is exactly defined by the set of all, by subgraphs which are defined by one guard seeing all of them. Okay, what do I mean? So K is a click in GT if and only if there exists a guard G which is all of K, right? So note that the the backward direction is fairly trivial. Okay, if there exists a guard which is all of K, then it is clearly a click, because if I take any 2 points, there exists a guard G itself which is both of them. Therefore, they will have a edge in GT. Therefore, since it is true for any pair in K, it is a click. Okay. What is hard to prove is the forward direction. I am not going to prove it, but whatever. Trust me that this claim is true. So combining these two lemmas, these guys gave this particular thing, saying that this annotated terrain guarding instance is true if and only if the corresponding click cover instance is true. And furthermore, they said that the visibility graph of this instance is corridor. Okay, which is exactly what I said before. Okay, not exactly. There is a slight jump here. Explaining them, it's not hard to see the jump, but I'll let you convince yourself of why this is true. Right. So what we will do is to try to generalize this to all terrains. Right. So from this point on is my work in sum. Okay. So okay, not this point on. Sorry. So they use two things in their particular proof. Okay. The first thing is something called the order claim. So if you take anything away from this talk, just take this particular claim. Okay. Everything else you can derive by yourself. Okay. This was proved in 2008 by again Ben Moshe and I think Katz was also part of this. But again, people from Israel. If I'm murdering his pronunciation, I'm sorry. So what it says is that if I have four different points on the terrain, such that A precedes B, which precedes C, which precedes D. Right? Preceding just means that it comes on the terrain. So A comes on the terrain before B does. Okay. So then if I have that A sees C and B sees D, right? A sees C and B sees D, then A must see D. Okay. The proof of this is again fairly simple. Nothing. It just it's not even first year analysis. It's just normal, it's a geometry problem. And but I again won't prove this. I'll let you like figure out the proof by yourself if you're interested. Okay, we will use this extensively. So the second thing that they used is they just made a small observation. Okay, they just said that look at the left convex vertex. Let's say V3. Okay, look at the visibility region of V3. What all can it see? You can see V2, V4, and V7. Okay, it can't see anything. I'm claiming that it can't see anything whose x coordinate is less than that of V3. Okay, which is fairly obvious because there's like a straight line jutting out from V3 to its left. So it can't see anything to its left. Okay, which is fairly innocuous. It's fairly easy to see. Okay, you can convince yourself that by looking at V5 as well. The only thing that it sees is V4, V5, V6, and V7. But these are left convex vertices. If you look at a right convex vertex, a symmetric claim is true. It can't see anything to the right of its x coordinate. So it can't see V8 and V9. Right? So what it sees is it sees V2, V4, V5, itself V6 and V7. Okay? This small observation is exactly what these guys made, Katz and Roisman. They said that any vertex in CL can only see to its right. And symmetric claim, any vertex in the right convex set can only see to its left, which is equivalent to saying that anything that sees CL must be, it's enough if they only look to its left, right? So the guards seeing CL need to only look to their left because CL can only see to the right. And the guards which are looking at CR need to only look to the right. Okay, let's just go back to the. So let's say I want to guard V3 and V5. Okay, then my claim is that I just need to look to the left. Okay, so if I consider V4, then since I want to guard V5, I can make sure that V4 is the left guard. Similar for V2, V7, and so on. Right, so that is what their claim was, and it was a fairly small observation, fairly innocuous, but it really helped them. And we will use the exact same thing to define our particular problem. Okay, so let's go. This is a very bad-looking theorem to go up front. So what this says is exactly what they said before. Okay. I am going to take an annotated terrain guarding instance, but this time the terrain is not orthogonal. But what it is that I am making sure that G and C are disjoint. Okay, which was followed before as well, because the set of reflex vertices and convex vertices are disjoint. And I'm also making sure that G is a set of one-sided guards. By one-sided guards, I mean that they can only see to one of their sides, okay, obviously. And my inference is the same as that, saying that the visibility graph of this instance is caudal. And also that there's a click in GT is 1 if and only if there exists a guard G, which is all of that in the click, okay, which is exactly how I break it into two. So the first thing that I may say that the visibility graph is caudal, and the second thing is that this is a true instance. This particular annotated guarding is true if and only if this particular click cover instance is true. Okay, so let's look at the first one. Okay, so we only prove this for a set of left guards, and I'm not going to prove this in full because the proof is fairly long. So I'll just like give you an idea of how we start. Okay, so what we do is we take a cycle of length greater than or equal to 4 in GT. Okay, then how so C1, C2, and so on up to CP. They're ordered based on how they appear on the cycle, right? So I can assume that because I can start the cycle from anywhere, okay, I can assume that C1 is the one which appears last in the terrain. Okay, this I can do because I can start anywhere in the cycle, and since I can go anti-clockwise or clockwise, and the neighbors of C1 are C2 and CP, I can assume that CP precedes C2. That is, CP appears on the terrain before C2 does. And since, as I mentioned, C2 and CP are the neighbors of C1, there exists a guard G12 and a guard G1P, which is C1 and C2 and C1 and CP respectively. Okay. The only thing I know is that C1 precedes both G12 and G1P because both of these are left guards. Okay. So I'm just going to give the easiest case of this particular theorem, and I'll just show the proof of that. Okay. So let's say G12 and G1P are the same. Okay. Then clearly there exists an edge between C2 and CP because GC is both C1 as well as C2 as well as CP, right, by definition. So since P is greater than or equal to 4, CP is not C3 and clearly it is not C1 as well. Therefore, there exists a chord in the cycle C in GT in the graph induced by C. Therefore, GTC is acyclic. Okay, so there are two remaining cases. I thought I would prove them at first, but I'm going to skip them. Which is that G1P precedes G12 and G12 precedes G1P. The proof uses the order claim repeatedly, and it's again, you have to look at a lot of cases, and I'm not going to go through. So I'm going to skip the proof. So it kind of goes on the fact that that you will always try to find a chord in GTC. That's the nature of it. Okay, so let's skip this. So yeah, I thought I would prove all this, but I'm slightly running short of time. So it turns out that if okay, actually I can't even do this. So once I go through, there's a lot of induction and so on. But proof of this, if you want the proof, you can just write me an email. I'll send you the the proper proof. Okay, so let's prove the second part of the thing at least properly. Okay, this is the easier part of the thing. So what it says is that there exists a clique in GT if and only if there exists a guard in the terrain which is all of K. Right? Again, as before, note that the backward direction is fairly trivial. Because there exists a guard which is all of K, then clearly K is a clique in GT. So we only prove this for a set of left guards again. We claim that the proof of the other part is fairly trivial. So, and we prove this by induction on the number of, induction on the size of K. If K was 2, then this claim is trivially true. Because if it had 2 vertices, so a clique with 2 vertices is exactly an edge. And this is the same as saying that 2 vertices, let's say V1 and V2, have an edge in GT if and only if there exists a guard which is both of them, which is exactly the definition, right? And that is exactly our claim. Therefore, the base case is true. And assume that this is true for sizes at most P and consider a clique of size P plus 1. And this order is as they appear on the terrain. Okay. So now consider K dash, which is K2 to Kp plus 1. This is clearly a size, this is a clique of size P. Okay, so therefore by induction hypothesis, there exists a guard which sees all of K dash, right? And there also exists a guard G2 which is K1 and Kp plus 1 because there exists an edge between K1 and Kp plus 1 in GT because we took K to be a clique. So if G1 and G2 are the same, which is G, then the visibility region of G would be K, right? Because we know that G1 sees K dash and G2 sees Kp plus 1. Therefore, G, which is G1 and G2, sees K dash as well as K1. Therefore, it sees all of K. Right? So we are left with two cases again. G2 precedes G1 and G1 precedes G2. The first case is as illustrated. Sorry, was there a question? Okay, so if there was no question, let me just proceed. So if we take the case that G2 precedes G1. If G2 precedes G1, then the image will look like this, where Kj is some arbitrary point between in K dash, right? So now my claim is that G1 sees K1, right? Why is this true? Because consider apply the order claim on the n circle vertices K1, Kj, G2 and G1. If I do that, then know that A sees C and B sees D. Therefore, A will see D. That is what the order claim told us. Therefore, G1, which already looked at all of K dash, will also look at K1. Therefore, visibility region of G1 is K. Therefore, we are done in this case. Note that I have not used the fact that G2 is not Kp plus 1. Okay? So, we allow this. So, let's look at the last case, which was that G1 precedes G2. If G1 precedes G2, then again I can choose four vertices nicely, Kj, Kp plus 1, G1 and G2. And if I apply the order claim on this again, I will get that G2 sees Kj. And since Kj was anything between between K2 and Kp plus 1, G2 sees all of K dash. Since G2 sees all of K dash as well as K1, G2 sees all of K. So we are done here. But note that, at least convince yourself that G2, sorry, it should be G1 cannot be, sorry, there's a typo. It must be G1 cannot be Kp plus 1. So convince yourself why this is true. So this clubbing these two together will give the main result that I promised at the beginning of this section. So, so this asks, right, what do G and C have to be disjoint? So the first theorem, the proof which I skipped, actually does not use this condition. Okay, I don't need G and C to be disjoint. The only time I need G and C to be disjoint is in the second case of the second theorem. But however, we can't go over it. We can't let G and C to be G and C to have some point in between them, as noted in this non-example. So if I let C to be in this example V1, V3 and V4, and G to be V4, V5 and V7, note that V5 is common between C and G. Then try convincing yourself that even though GT of C is a clique, that is, there exists a edge between any pair in C, there does not exist a guard which sees all of C. Okay, try convincing yourself that. So this will be a contradiction to our assumption, or not a contradiction. This will make sure that theorem 2, the second theorem that we prove, is not true. So hopefully, as I mentioned before, why this is an extension of what existed before, because R and C, since R and C are disjoint by definition, reflex vertices and convex vertices are disjoint. Therefore, R and CL are disjoint. So, and also we also noted that to see CL, I just need a bunch of left guards. So I can apply the theorem that we just got, the main theorem, to this particular problem. Okay, so this is exactly what Katz and Roisman got in 2008 for orthogonal terrains. So this comes as a direct corollary of the theorem that we proved. So there is one more corollary, which was used in the paper that I said before, which produced a nice algorithm for orthogonal terrains, right? Which is fairly, it looks like it came out of nowhere. So what it says is, if this particular annotated terrain guarding instance is false, then there exists a small set of size k plus 1, which is false. Okay, so why I say this is small is because C can be of any size, right? C can be order n, it can be order 2 power n, can be anything. But I'm just claiming that there exists something which is in order k, which itself gives a false instinct. So this is where we will use the stuff that we described at the very beginning. So let's say this is false. If this is false, then the corresponding click cover instance is false, right? Because we prove the equivalence between the two things. Since if this is false, what does this mean? This means that the minimum number of clicks required to cover GT is greater than K. Because if it was less than K, I would just use that particular instance, right? Which is the same as saying that the click cover number of GT is greater than K. Since the click cover number of a caudal graph is same as the independent number of a caudal graph, the independent number of GT is greater than K. Therefore, the maximum size independences of GT is at least K plus 1. Which is the same as saying that I can find an independent set of K plus 1 of GT, right? Why can I do it? I'm also claiming that I can do it in polytime. Why can I do it in polytime? Because if you remember, long time ago, we said that there exists a result that in caudal graphs, the independent set can be found in, the maximum size independent set can be found in polytime. Once I find out the maximum size independent set, just take K plus 1 vertices of that, and you will get that that K is also an independent set. So the final claim is that this is indeed a false instance, and this will follow by the pigeonhole principle. Why? Let's say there existed K many guards which can see all of you. That means that there is at least one guard which can see two vertices in U, because size of U is K plus 1, right? But if there exists a guard which sees two vertices in U, by definition, they must have an edge between them in GT, which is a contradiction to our assumption that U is an independent set, right? Therefore, all of this leads to a contradiction, which proves that this particular instance is false. So, conclusion. So, why is anything that I said important? Well, it is important for two reasons. The first reason being that I kind of, gave an equivalence between the terrain guarding problem and the caudal graph, and a relation between caudal graphs and terrain guarding. Caudal graphs have been very well studied, so they've been documented since the 70s. We know a lot about them, so which is why it's important. So stuff that we don't know, linking them to stuff that we know, is the basis of creating knowledge, I guess. And the second one, as I promised, was that the theorems that Kautz and Reisman presented were exactly the ones that Ashok and Ashok, Saket, and so on, they all used in 2018 to produce an FPT algorithm, special algorithm for discrete orthogonal terrain guarding. So this will help to, give us a bunch of open problems. The first one being that can we generalize this result further? We already know that we can't make sure that we can't make G and C to be touching, okay? But can we extend it in some other direction? That is the first question. The second question is that the one that we started off with, or what is considered to be super important, is discrete terrain guarding FPT. We still don't know this. It is a possible step in producing an FPT algorithm, but we are not done yet. Okay. What about continuous terrain guarding? I haven't even defined what continuous terrain guarding is. So these guys proved that FPT exists for only discrete terrain guarding. What about continuous terrain guarding? We don't know that for orthogonal terrain guarding even till now. So that kind of concludes my talk. I finished with 15 seconds to spare. So I need to thank a bunch of people. Shushaman Bandhavadhyay, I'm not sure if he's here. He's a PhD student working under Aditro, who's a faculty in the computer science department in NISER. I also need to thank Shushmita. She was in NISER when this project was underway last summer, but she's in IMSC now, I think. And if you made it to the end, then thank you as well. So if you have any questions, you can ask me now, as well as you can mail me. I've given my mail in part of the abstract. And if you find any mistakes or typos, or if you want the actual paper, or if you just want to discuss the topic as well, you are welcome to me. So that concludes it, I think. What is the time? 5:10. So I've not taken too much extra time, I believe. So yeah, so now the floor is open to questions. So yeah. Yeah, I know that I skipped over a few proofs. Those were by design because, well, I can't fit in all those proofs in one. Yeah, so if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
So I don't think any have a question. So let's all thank Prahlad for the wonderful talk, and let's conclude here today. Goodbye and have a good day.
Okay, Manavatra, can you just so you'll be uploading this
To the YouTube, yes.
yeah, okay, fine.